All right, we're back. It's COMP397, Web Game Programming, and it's week 4, lesson 4. Lesson 1, I mean, lesson 4, part 1. I'll be okay. Last week, we kind of did an intro into this whole idea of the state machine. Right? So let's go back into that. I'm just going to launch my virtual machine here in Windows 10. Let's log in here. While it's doing that, I'll check to see if we're still good from a recording perspective. It looks like we are. Had a little bit of issues today. So here I'm in Windows 10, and I'm going to bring up Visual Studio. I may have to change my resolution a little bit, it looks like, but that's no problem. And I'm just going to go into the last project we worked on, which was COMP397, Lesson 3. Right? That's what we were working on last day. Right? So before I get that, I'm just going to go into Windows 10 here and change my display settings. So that way, I can actually see everything a little clearer. And I guess they've made some changes to the virtual machine as well. I know the VMware just came out with some patches for VMware Fusion and VMware Workstation for Windows 10 and LCAP 10, right, which is what I'm using right now. Let's try this. Okay. Okay, this looks like it might actually have worked okay. All right, so so last day, what we saw was, just as a review, because I think I have to go with that again very briefly, is we created a couple of modules. So if I go back into our Solution Explorer, we have our structure looks like this, okay, so far. Right? And again, by the way, if you want to follow along, you could certainly follow along on GitHub, where I have, if we go to Centennial College, and we look at our COMP397 lesson 3. If you notice, there is a you can grab this this kind of repository here, and you can certainly download the zip if you want to kind of stay on track, or fork me on GitHub here, and then it'll be copied into your own files. Okay, so let's go back. So that's what I'm using. I'm using lesson 3 from last week, and I'm building on that, right? So remember what we did last time. We built on a lesson. Right? I'm going to make a new lesson, and I'm going to show you this thing because this is a workflow for you guys in Visual Studio to go and create another version or an archive of what you did previously and build on it as a template. So let's see how that works. Okay, so again, I'm going to close all these up for a second. Right? If you notice, I'm just closing all my files. Right? And then what I'm going to go into is going to file. I'm going to export template. Right? And it says project template. I'm going to go next, right? And this time it's going to be called COMP397 lesson 3. I'm not going to add a description, and I'm just going to click finish. And when I do that, it kind of pops it into this, folder template stuff, right? Okay, now I can actually close my solution down because I want to preserve what we did from last week, right? So we can always go back to it, and I'll make a new one, lesson 4 today, right? So let's try that out. So I'm going to go File, New, Project. Follow with me, guys, so that we have done this again and again. It's good practice, right? File, New, Project. And now I'm going to go open up because I made a template. I'm going to go to the, yeah, it's getting me to sign in. See if I can actually do this without. Damn you, El Capitan. So I'm going to use COMP397 lesson 3. Right, there it is as a template. And if you notice now, my name is COMP397 lesson 3. I'm just going to change to lesson 4. And if you wait a second, I'm just going to pop this up on GitHub, and then we'll start with lesson 4 instead of lesson 3. Okay, so then here it is. I'm making a new repository. Now it's going to be called lesson 4, starting off, right? And I'm going to build on this one. But meanwhile, I have to create a repository online that kind of aligns with what I've done. Actually, I'll do it on the Mac side. And I'll build it up online so that way you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to pop out of here into College, and I'm going to sign in. That's myself. It's really bizarre. It's kicked me out of everything. It's like I have a new computer. Everything is like not here. It's bizarre. Which is, I mean, some people like that kind of thing. They like to you know, like the newness of everything again, as everything's been reset. But for me, it's kind of a pain in the ass. So I'm going to say COMP397, and it's lesson 4 now that I'm going to be following, right? Because it's the new lesson. And I'm also going to create a README file. Why not? Since we'll do that, but we'll do it afterwards. Okay. So I'm going to go create repository, and it creates just a container for what I'm going to be doing. So this is when you do your workflow with GitHub. Again, you'd kind of create your own repository up here. I'm going to grab this link, because that's the one I want to connect with. And I'm going to go back here and go to Team Explorer and go to Changes, right? Here's all my changes, making sure that there's nothing that's excluded, all right, or untracked. Because if I have excluded or untracked files, they will not be added into my GitHub repository. Okay, so then I've got everything in there. I kind of make a commit, and I'll say kind of a new project based on lesson 3. Commit, and then I want to go home. I want to unsync commits, and I want to pop in URI, which is the new one for lesson 4, and click publish. And when I do that, it'll push my changes up to GitHub. And if I want to check that out to see if it's done, I can just refresh this, and as you can see, now it's lesson 4, but it's based on lesson 3. New project based on lesson 3. Let's add a README file up online, and I'll go pull to show you how to do that in the editor. Again, so I've got COMP397 lesson 4, and I'll say repo for featuring, we'll say state machines, and the we'll call it the new scene class we're going to build for COMP397 at Centennial. All right, so then we just add kind of commit the change. Now we have this README file with a bit of information about what this repository is about. But we're one branch ahead. We have one commit ahead. We have 3 commits, but whereas if I go back to my project here, I only have 2 commits, right? So I need to go back into, I'm in unsync commits. I'm going to do a pull, and what it's going to do is going to pull down the update, and now I'm up to date with everything else. I'm kind of up to date with the stuff that's online. So here I am. I'm ready to start now with my project. Okay, so there's a couple things. Remember that the first project, the first assignment is due tonight, right? That's the due date for the first assignment. And remember we talked about that whole sliding thing. You're supposed to come up with your game, and most of it is around documentation. You were asking me about documentation. So I popped up a external document, and the external document has extra categories that you don't need to fill in, right? So the only thing you need for this assignment, if I was going to go into our courses detail, let's go into 397 for a second. And I'm going to look at assignment number 1, which is the dragon. Here we are from last week. I'm just going to double click on this. Again, the requirements, even though I've given you a document to handle, if you look further down here, is the following. All you need in the documentation for now, externally, is a company logo, right? So just an actual document, a Word document or PDF, table of contents, your version history for your game, right? And detailed game description, which may or may not include, for bonus marks, something like this to describe what your nodes are going to be for your game, right? The idea here is you're plotting out your game without really doing a lot of coding, right? There's not a lot of code involved when you use the Impress.js framework to just shift scenes around, right? Now remember that what I'm looking for is I don't want blank slides. I want some pictures. Maybe you want to add in some descriptive text of your game. Obviously, it's gonna be like a game, and you want to take advantage of the framework. I will give bonus points if you can make it work with TypeScript and Create.js. You know, and you make it work with scenes instead of Impress.js. That's the whole idea there, right? So if you can do that, that's great, right? Now, do I expect you to do that? Absolutely not, because we haven't covered everything you need, and you'd have to kind of intuit some of that, or I'm going to give it to you now and then finish it by tonight. Good luck, right? So that's like really hard to do, right? But if you want to, I would definitely give you a bonus for that. So the document that you get online, right, the document that I popped up on in Dropbox in the same assignment is this one, external game document template. And if you take a look at it, it actually includes a lot more stuff that you don't need. So it says, hey, insert your company logo here, right? So this is where you kind of pop in a company logo. And again, for the guys on the gaming side, I've kind of made it available on that side as well. So for people who want to do it for their other game, which is due Monday, right? That's fine. And then you put, kind of a title of your document here, and this would be the name of the game, okay? Like if you're making our game here, which is like the Dragon or whatever you call your game, choose your own death, call it whatever you like, choose your own adventure. And then maybe any kind of subtitle you want to put in, and you don't need it. Like if you don't need something, just take the section out. Version, if there's a version, obviously you change your copyright to 2015. Again, I got this from Microsoft in 2012. Your author's name here, and then the date. You'd obviously change to today's date, or some recent date when you're going to hand it in. Obviously, you want to change some of this stuff in the header of the document, and then your table of contents. You'd insert a table of contents here, and there's some good examples on how to do that that are hyperlinked to the pages you want to go to. You're not going to have a lot of content. Version history, again, very brief from a version history perspective. And if I go back to the details, I mean, you could literally put a link to your GitHub if you've got in your commits, and that would be enough on version history. Or you could detail, like my first commit, this is what more information. The more you put in here, it's good for you to understand what you've done with your game, right? And it's really good for the person who's reading this document to understand your process, right? Because it's really, for me, for this first assignment, it's all around your process, not so much your output. Your output's important, obviously, it's got to work, right? But I want to see your thinking. I want to see how you plan and all that kind of stuff. Because if you're weak at planning, and when we get something more complex as we move forward, then it's going to be more of a challenge for you to finish, right? So that's why I'm making you do this thinking in advance, right? And this is the only time we'll weigh this so heavily. It won't be weighed so heavily next time. Okay, so, and again, you notice there's a bunch of different stuff, like your camera. If you were going to use this game document for your other game, for COMP305 Game Programming 1, then you would say camera point of view is orthographic 2D. But in this particular case, there is no camera point of view. It's just it would be non-applicable. So you just take this piece out. You just go, I want to take my camera side up. Same with gameplay mechanics. Same thing with controls, unless you want to put in something about controls where you move your slides around with your space bar or arrow keys or something. Saving and loading, you don't have any saving and loading. I'm not asking for an interface sketch, so this wouldn't be in here. Menu and screen descriptions, I mean, you could certainly get some screen captures in there if you wanted to, but I'm not asking for that. A description of your game world and all that stuff, and levels and game progression and characters. Like, there's a lot of different sections in here that you could choose to fill out or not, or customize and add a section that I asked you to put in there, right? But if you notice, there's all kinds of information here, or sections that you can fill in, and it's just a document. It's a template for you to fill in this document so you have something. Now, let's say if you wanted to not use this document and make your own, would I be okay with that? Absolutely. I'm giving you a document to give you an idea of what you need as a format, but this is your document. Imagine if you're going to make a game tomorrow. This is a great document for an indie developer to have handy to put together, like almost like a brief. Here's my game brief. I want to come up with an idea, kind of stuff, right? And this is what my game's about. Here's a screenshot and some concept art or whatever I'm going to put up. And here's where I got my multimedia from. I got my audio from here. I got my video from here. I got my other stuff, and I put it all together, right? So that's what the game document's all about. Does that answer your question for the game document? Again, it doesn't have to be so complex. You can use as little of it or as much of it as you want. And, I think that's going to be okay. So I'm getting buzzed, so someone's going to tell me that you're not broadcasting anymore because your broadcast sucks or something like that, like I got last time, which was bad. Okay, so let's get back to this. So we're back into the scene thing now. And remember what we've got. Our index.html is the central document, like I said before, when we do web game development with something like Canvas. So I'm just going to unpin this for a second. In Visual Studio, I'm working with Visual Studio again, 2015. 2015 is perfectly fine. Now they've kind of updated some of the stuff that would work as well. But if you notice, like I said, we have our game document, and I'm kind of linking all my script files together here. So I start off with my config script. We kind of did a config last week where we did a bunch of constants that we can use instead of hard coding our values in our game. This is kind of better practice, right? Still, we're quite far away from doing what we need to do. Then I have all my libraries, including jQuery, which I'm not really using. But I wanted to show you how to link that in anyway, right? and our game scripts. And these are our custom game scripts we've written. The ones we've written so far are, I'm just going to put this in here. We've kind of added in a config way up here. That actually could go further down, so I can probably take this one, copy it. So let's copy this game script, the first one on the top. And again, you can grab these files off of GitHub now if you want to follow me, right? And kind of start off from where I'm starting. So you're not behind, right? And I'm going to put this just here under my game script. So that's where it kind of really belongs. These are my game scripts, right? So my config file, if you remember what that was, I'm going to go to it now. I'm going to go to Solution Explorer, and I'm going to look at my scripts file, my scripts folder. I have a config folder, and inside my config folder, I have a config.ts file, the TypeScript file. I'm going to double click. And if you notice, all it is, I've created a module. Here's my module that has, I'm exporting some constants, menu state, play state, and the overstate, the game overstate. Now, if you notice on over here, right, what we're looking at, there's nothing that's compiled yet. Well, because it won't compile until I save everything. Once I save it all, right, it actually does compile stuff. So I have to save my file, right? And if I was to run this the first time, there you go. So you see how it's transpiled or transcompiled everything from the TypeScript into the JavaScript. And if you notice, the JavaScript using this self-executing anonymous function with closure, right, to create this, namespace, which we call config. Right, that's all we're doing here. And this config, I can access it now by going config.menustate, config.outPlayState, and so on. Right? That's all it's going to do. So that's one of the things we did last time. And we need to do this in order for me to be able to put this through a switch statement. Let me show you that. Just as a recap. Let's go into our core game elements. Here's my game.ts file now. And I'm just going to unpin this so you can see it. My game.ts file is definitely the most complex one we have so far. But we're getting down to this, okay? It sets up my game. Like I said, I have my init function, and then I go through my game loop, right, where I do a stage update, and I also measure my stats. I do some stat counting. And then as I go down, when I set up my stats, I set up my stats for, method or function, and then I do this. I have one event handler called this click start button event, which I have one start button in there. And then I have my state machine. This is it. This is my state machine. It's funny. It's the this function that says change state, and all I'm doing is I'm putting this state variable through a switch statement, and when if anything changes, what ends up happening is I call my state function to change the current state function, the one that I'm looking at, to the new menu that I'm looking at, the new states function. So. And I remember what we did was, in my Solution Explorer, I also created last time, I took my game information, where I create my labels and my buttons, and I put it in its own states folder. So here's my states folder. And if I look at my menu.ts, which is my new state, this is my menu state or scene, right? Take a look and see what I have. I have this, it looks exactly like what we had before, a menu, and there's a hello label, we've seen this before, and there's a button. And I've added them to I've added the scene, right, to the, I've added the scene to the stage as an example. That's all I've done here. It's pretty simple, right? And I've got my scene. So I've added my start button to the scene. I remember I made this a container class. I'm using a container class that's built into Create.js called container. It's pretty simple. And all the container does is it's another coordinate space, if you will, or a container that allows you to add children to it as a parent container, almost like a game object, if you will. And then what happens is we take that game object, that global container now, and we add that onto the scene, and anything that's inside of that gets added. All right, so guess what? We have our pattern to create the other ones. Let's make, so this one right here, it says, hey, game start, and I have my start button. Let's add our, kind of a game play, right, scene. And I have some buttons here. Let's go into my Solution Explorer for a second. I have a, in my assets, I've included a couple of images. I have my back button, right, which will take me back a step. I have my next button, which will take me forward a step, and I have my start button, which starts me off. So right now we're in our start button. Let's add in a back button and a next button in their next scene. So 2 more buttons. So we're going to add in one that takes us forward 1 step, one that goes back. So we can traverse, you know, our scenes by going back and forth. That's what I want you to be able to do, right? So if you can do that, all you're doing is switching containers. I'm going from one scene container to the next scene container and back. Now, I have to warn you that even though I have this menu state and it's in my state function, right, this is really incomplete, right? What I want to do is not just create a state function, but create a scene class, right? We haven't done that, and we would have to rejig this a little bit later on when we do so. So how would I do that if I was going to think about creating a scene class? Well, if I look at what I've got, what it generates, so here's, you know, just compile this thing for a second so you see what I'm talking about, right? If you notice what it does, it actually creates it as it's its own container again. So you've got a function with some, you know, objects that are inside the function. Well, it's not so difficult for us to create this as a class. Instead of just having a menu, right, as an example, as that we call this thing menu, this would be the menu class if we wanted to make a menu class, or we can make a generic scene class first and have our new menu be a type scene, okay? Now, if I was going to make a new scene class, so Stephen, what would you think? How would I make a scene class? What kind of things would I have in my scene? I need to have, well, that's just stuff, right? So I need something to actually display my stuff, right? So some kind of method, like this main method here, that displays my stuff. That's number one. And I probably need some kind of, go ahead. I could need this. I could make it so that my scene itself extends my container, because really that's what it is in some ways, right? Some ways. But I also want you to think about this. It also needs an update function, the scene itself. Why? Because I have an update function in my game right now, right? So let's say I have stuff that I want to update. Like, for example, in my scene, let's do this now in my menu scene. Let's just say I want my button not only to listen to clicks, but I want it to rotate. How would I do that, right? I can't. I don't, first of all, it only lives and breathes within this namespace. I can't exactly go in there and say, unless I go here, right, which we've defined some scenes. Here's my scene, right? And you notice that is there a state that I'm calling? I have my stats, I have my scene, that's a container, right, as an example, and I have a hello label and a start button, which is kind of global. And again, do I really need for these things to be here right now? And probably not. These things, hello label and start button, can certainly be not here, right? Because they're not used in my scene. These things, hello label and start button, would be fields that would be in my new class, my scene class. I'd have different fields for my scene class, and I would include different buttons or objects within my scene. Okay, so I would do that. But if I want to update my label, I mean, I could do it in my global. I have a global game loop. This is my game loop for the entire game, right? But wouldn't I rather do something like this? Scene.update. That updates whatever the current scene is, as opposed to I'm going to update my main menu scene. I'm going to update. What if my menu scene is not active? I can't update it, right? So I need to kind of update my scene itself. And therefore, I need another construct, not just what I did. What I did was kind of cool. And if I don't have any kind of motion or anything like that, we're good, right? But that's definitely not going to be the case for us. We're going to have motion. We're going to have updates. We're going to have things that move around the screen, which means we have to have something that we have to have our own update scene, update method. Okay. Now, but if I was going to instantiate some kind of scene like this, right? Even if I was to make it its own, so it's not extending anything. It just has a container. Every scene has a container. Every scene has other things that are part of it. I could do that, right? I could say, or I could make it an extension of the container. If I could add everything to this, I could say this.addChild. I could add stuff to the scene, and I could remove things from the scene. I could do those kind of things, which to me, all of a sudden when I think about it, sounds like maybe that's what I need to do. Make my scene itself, right, an extension of the container class. So it has all the properties of a container. It has a geometry. It has the ability for me to add objects to the scene, all that kind of stuff. And I think from a readability, or if you think about it from a context perspective, and I'm building a new class, if I can imagine, if you and I were to script it out, I'd want to do that. I want to kind of build out a scene, because there's no scene in Create.js. We're going to make one that has all this stuff. Maybe even a camera, if I was going to go there. We don't have a camera right now. But I would have to have that. A camera, I would probably have lighting in my scene. I have all the same stuff that I would have in a Unity or in something like a Blender or Maya. So again, how do I do that? So the first thing I want to do is, let's leave the things the way they are, right? But I want to create an object or some kind of, instead of states, as an example, I want to create a global object that I can base it off of. So example would be something called, I'm going to leave states there. I'm going to call it scenes. Bear with me. So I'm going to make a new folder, which we're just going to kind of jig our project a little bit, right? And I want to make the scene class, right? Now the scene class, would it be an object? I would say yeah. I would say a scene would be an object, and then in my scenes or states, you can call it whatever you like, we would have instances, if you will, or I would extend the scene object to create specific scenes, like my menu scene, my game scene, and so on. They would all be part of the scene class, and they would have very similar things. So when I'm using inheritance to first create a container class, as an example, an extension of the container class that includes other things, like an update function, right? I need that. And then on top of that, I would need to extend that further, to take it one step further in my scene to make it so that I have specific types of scenes, right? Where I have my menu scene or whatever. Let's check this out. So first thing, let's go into my objects, and I'm going to add in another. I've got a button, a label. Let's add a scene object. So I'm going to go right-click, and I'm going to add a new TypeScript file, right? And we're going to call this lowercase scene, okay? And we're going to put this, right? We're going to put this in our module objects. So we're going to say module objects. That's our namespace, right? Again, it's just all around plotting it in your head. How do you do this stuff, right? And obviously, if we were in a more professional environment, making a much larger application, I would kind of script things out. I'll write things out for you and plot them out. But for now, let's just do it like this. I'm going to make a new class that I'm going to export. I'm going to say export class and capital S for scene. There is no scene class right now. And guess what? It's going to extend the create.js.container class. That's what it's going to do. Right? That's what it's going to do here. Okay, so now that I've got this, sorry, I'm just actually things right. I'll open and close brackets here. And I'm going to just unpin this thing so you can see how it looks. So this is what I got, right? If I save this thing, again, if I look at the JavaScript, just that alone, and I haven't connected this to my file, it does all this, right? Like this is all the stuff it does, right? So it adds this extends functionality, and what it does is it connects my new object. This is my new object. I'm using prototypical inheritance in the background to make this new scene class that inherits all the properties of my container class that comes from create.js. So that means I can add stuff to my scene. I can say this.add within my class, and anything that I added into it would be part of my scene. It would be added in. And then I can add my scene, the whole scene, when I've instantiated the scene, onto my stage. Or I could add a portion of my scene to the stage, whatever I feel like adding, right? If I was to go this way, all right, making it a container. The other option is I could create a game portion or some kind of, you want to call it a canvas or its own like a stage. It's like, a stage that's related to this. That would be a container. Okay, I could call it game. I could call it whatever I want. Let's play it like this and see if this works for us. Okay. So now, remember, whenever we create a new class, we should create a constructor. By default, we have an empty constructor, just like we normally do. But we'll name this constructor. And now, what do we need for the constructor? Really nothing right now. So it's going to be the empty constructor, right? But remember, because I'm calling the empty constructor, I'm also extending my create.js container class, I need to also call the super class. So I'm going to say super, and the super class doesn't need anything. So right now, because it's just a container. So this is the first piece. So I have an empty constructor right now. right? So whenever I call my scene, it generates just a container right now. That's all it does. Okay, it's very, very simple. And if I look again at on the side here, it's all this, right? Okay, that's nice and easy. Let's go to the next step. So I've got my constructor, I've got my super. I know I need, let's just scaffold this out. I need an update method. So let's put an update method in there. So I'm going to say update, right? And I need some kind of main method for it to go. Like I need something that when I have a method, by the way, this method is going to be public, right? It's going to be a public method that's going to return void, right? It's not going to return anything. It's a public method. I'm going to leave it lowercase update for now. So these are, and let's just start doing some commenting. So this is a public methods. If I could type, this will be my constructor. Okay, my constructor, public method, and I need some kind of method that actually does all the work. So I can call it main, my main method. I can call it game. I can call it, my action, scene, action, right? Like one of those. It makes sense if we're going to go with the whole premise of things. I could call it start, right? Scene.start, start to scene, right? Which makes sense. So let's call it start. I don't know, I'm kind of bowing down to the Unity gods for a second, but let's just use this as as another thing. So I'm going to call this in fact, I put it just underneath the public methods label here. I'll make another one called start. So I'm going to say public update start, and then we'll also return void. So we're just scaffolding this out right here, right? We haven't actually instantiated a scene. We don't have nothing that does right now. This is just if you think about it, just the scaffold for what the methods are. In fact, if anything, I can make this an abstract class and never instantiate my scene as an object, right? But for now, I'm trying to keep it simple for you guys, right? All right. So in my start method, I'm going to have some stuff. I'm going to have the ability for me to, like again, I'm going to put some stuff in my start. That's what it's going to have. It's something that's built in. So I would override my start method in my scene if I was going to build it up. This is just a generic scene, right? A scene class. Then I would have some stuff in there. I would have in my start. I would have something like add a button, right? I would add a something, whatever it would be, right? Here's something. Do I always want to? If I want to add something to the scene, I could do something like, whatever I want to add. The object that I want to add, the game object that I want to add, right? It would be something like this, scene.add. So maybe I need an add method, which would do an add child. But instead of me doing something like this dot add child, which I could do scene.add child, blah, blah, I could do that because it is a container. It has an is-a relationship. I've just added a couple more methods, a start method and an update method that didn't exist before, right? I could add stuff to the scene. I could by using the add child method, and I could do things like remove all as an example. I could remove everything from the scene as well. I could do that as well, or I can create some accessor methods, if you will, that do it for me. So something like this dot add child, and I pass something into the scene itself, right? That's all I'm passing into the method. That would add some kind of game object, right? Some kind of generic game object that I would pass in. So I can do it all up front and nothing in here, right? Okay. So how would I do that? So again, I've got my start, I got my update, maybe I got my add. Let's put that in there. So I'm going to say public, we're going to say add, so scene.add, right? And it's going to also return void, but this time I want it to add something to the scene. That could be that I'm adding a text object. It could be that I'm adding a whatever. It's got to be generic that I can add anything, right? Well, Create.js has a super object, right? So if I was going to look at the documentation for this to make sure that I'm doing this right, I'm going to go to my Create.js, or easel.js is what I'm doing. This is, you don't know where I'm going yet, but you'll see. So here's my easel.js. And if I look at my docs for easel.js here, so I'm looking at my documentation, just gonna wait till this updates. it's showing me I've got a bunch of stuff here, right? So I want to look at my container. Well, look what if I look at my container class for a second, it tells me a little bit about it. It says it extends display object. So display object is the create.js superclass for my container. Okay, cool. And if you notice what a container does, I can do an add child because that's part of the method. These are the methods that are built in, add child, and so on. I can add child at, I can do a bunch of stuff in my container to add things in, right? I can add an event listener, and I can use my on function to cache. So I could just accept the regular things as well. I could just say, you know what? It's because I'm following my display list. I don't have to go crazy and add in whatever it's going to be. Because when I do an add child, if I click on add child for a second, you can see that the add child function, here's the actual function that's been written for add child. It takes the child function, whatever it is, and a child is defined as a display object, right? Let's go back. Because that's what it is. It's really taking a child as a display object and adding it into the scene, right? And you can add anything, a bitmap instance, a shape instance, a text instance, something. An example of this would be if I wanted to add in a text object, like for the label that we made. So here's my text object. And when we look at my text object, guess what? It extends the display object as well. So I'm actually adding a display object to another display object. So if I click on display object at a high level, right, its superclass is the event dispatcher. I don't want to go that high. I think if I just said create.js.displayObject, that would be enough to say anything that I get, I want to add child, a very high level. So if I wanted to do this, and I'm not sure if I do yet, right, this add function, I would do something like this. Create.js, it's going to require create.js dot, right, and it's going to be display object. Now here's the problem. Why am I not getting code hinting? By the way, any idea? I'm not getting any code hinting anymore, right? Why am I not getting code hinting? Let me just go back and show you why. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to save everything and to close this off. This is a Visual Studio problem, by the way, guys. If you ever have, I'm going to double click back on my scene, and now I'm going to go back in here, right? And I go create.js. Hopefully that'll fix it, right? Dot, right? And then I can't. It looks like I can't do it. If I go this dot, that should also give me some code hinting. So there's definitely something wrong with my code hinting. And sometimes, like I said, I need to do is close off all these windows, right? Because it's an issue. Because I've got everything else closed off. Like I don't have a problem right now, right, with any of my functions except for what I just typed in, right, which is this add function. Okay. See what I'm saying? Do you get your code hinting when you go in there? Not at all. No. Not inside. So you get it here. So if I go to, implements, look, if I go implements interface, if I go implements here, to my code hinting, implements interface, whatever it's going to be, whatever the interface is, right? It would do it. But because I have this the way it's done, a create.js container, and I've added in my superclass just like this, right? And I've got these public methods that are called start, update, and add, right? And if you notice, if I hover over them, I actually get some feedback on what they are. This is an object.scene.update. That's what it is. That's the actual method, right? But when I go inside, I get nada, right? I don't get any kind of thing going on in here at all. Well, it doesn't matter. Just follow me here with what I'm telling you. Right? There's a reason why this is all happening, right? So I want to lay out my scene this way is what I'm saying. So I could add to it or whatever. But what I want to really do is I want to extend my container class in this particular instance to create this generic object. Generic object. And if I go to TypeScript, lang.org to figure this out, and if I look at learn, and if I go to handbook, I'll go to handbook here, and if I go to if I look at classes, let's take a look at classes for a second. I can see how I can do inheritance. It tells me how to do everything. If you're not clear about how to do all this stuff, it talks about the animal class and so on, and it talks about accessors. You can get getter and setters, and how to come up with accessors. This is the latest version. Static properties of classes, you can do that. Also different advanced techniques and so on. Like there are tons and tons of examples here of how to do things right. If I go to my language specification, it'll actually bring up this document that tells me all the stuff here that I've got in here. Like I got ambient declarations, I got classes, basic concepts of how things work, different kinds of typing, objects, and so on, array type literals, and specifying members and the whole thing. So if you ever want to get your idea of how TypeScript would work, you would look here in our in the TypeScript documentation. What I really want to know is abstract class. Can I create an abstract class now? I'm not sure if it's available yet in TypeScript 1.6. Right? I can definitely create namespaces and modules, and ambience is what it's called, right? But I don't think they're quite ready to create an abstract class yet. I think it's going to come in 1.8 or 1.7, something like that. But that's what I'm doing. So this is what I'm really doing. I'm making a class, but I'm not really going to instantiate this class as is. I'm just making it so that I've defined the methods, start, almost like an interface, start, update, add, and I want to implement this interface, right, in a method. I want to make this so that the constructor is a container, where I create the object this way, right? But my add doesn't really do anything right now. I'll almost want to do something like this dot add child. Look at this, which would work, right? So I would say this dot add child and whatever my parameter is going to be, right? I don't have a parameter, and I would take it in here like this, and it would have to be some kind of create.js, as an example, dot display object. So display, I'm just going to type it properly. That's what it would have to be, a display object. Now the reason why this isn't working is because create.js in this namespace, right? I'm trying to access the create.js namespace from within a container class of itself, right? And that's why it's giving me some issues. And that's why, my friends, I highly don't recommend you make this add method right now. We can add it later. All you would need to do, because the container is a container and it has my add child methodology, I could just do it on the outside. So I just add stuff to it on the fly. All right, so I got my start method and I got my update method, and my update method is going to basically, it's going to update every frame. I've got my class, my scene class as an object, and I'm going to add this as a scene. So it's going to, so my other scenes are going to extend my scene class, and they're going to have start methods that I'm going to override and update methods that I'm going to override that are built in. Okay. I'm just doing this to kind of structure myself out. So this is what it would look like. Okay. And the other reason why I'm doing this is because if I ever want to check that it's a scene, if I don't do this, then they're not scenes. They're whatever, the main scene or whatever. This way I've kind of grouped them together. They have a common thing about them all. They're all containers, but now they're all scenes as well. Okay, follow me here. Okay, so now this is going to be the scene class. So declare the scene class. Okay, that's what I'm doing here. And now I need to add my scene class as an object onto my into my index.html. So here's my index.html. It's just an object that I'm adding in, just from a building block perspective, right? And here's my scene class, and I'm just going to minimize this or minify this a little bit more so I can drag and drop. Here's my scene class. Now, where should it go? Should it go above my label and my button, or below my label and my button? Well, I think I want to have access to all my new objects in my scene. So I probably want to have it so that scene is above a menu, my menu state, and it's below my buttons and objects. Like it's the last object I want to add. So I'm going to put that in there. By the way, I'm probably going to make a generic game object as well. All right, later on. Okay, so I've got my scene in there. And that's one step. And step two would be in my game.ts file, because this is the main core, the core file that I'm using. Remember we talked about this, is I want to do the same thing here. I want to make some space, right? And I want to drag and drop my scene.ts file into my my game.ts file in the same location approximately as my other stuff. So now I have access to a scene. Okay, that's the first thing I want to do. Okay, cool. Now, So I've got my generic scene. It doesn't do anything. It's just an abstract class, if you will. Okay, but I can call all my scenes now objects.scene. They're all an object.scene. That's what they are. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Let's go into my states method, right? My states module. And if I look at my menu.ts, so I'm going to just open up menu.ts. Right now, I need to do this. Scene is equal to new create.js container. And I have this export function called menu, which I'm going to call it start. That's what it's going to be called, right? And I'm going to turn this this menu function into a menu scene. How would I do that? Well, it's not that difficult. I can just do this. Now that I have my scene in place, I can just, it's just a neat name for it, right? So I'm going to say export class. I'm just leave my function there for a second. Export class menu with a capital M, right? Extends the object dot scene class. Right? That's what it does. So that's my first thing. So that's my menu extends my scene. Okay. I need a constructor, just like I normally have in my scene, right? Now my scene is a container. That's what it is. So this is my menu class, not my menu state necessarily. So we'll get rid of this. My menu class. Modifying my stuff. I have to go back there and make sure it all works by the end, by the way. My menu class, and then in there I need a constructor, which we're also going to call. Sorry, and yeah, that was right. And because it's extending, I also need to call my secret class, which means I'm just calling it as my scene. And all it does is ask for nothing. There's no, it's a closed, it's a kind of an empty constructor right now. Objects.scene is what it's going to add in. But my scene, the word scene, is something that I'm using right now. Objects.scene is my actual class, right? Now I also automatically have an update method, and I also automatically have a start method. But I'm going to override those, right? I could call them now if I wanted to, right? But I could do something. I just could override them like again. So I can just redefine them like this. So public start, which returns void. And once when I do this, what happens, right? It gives me the ability to override it. All I'm doing is I'm overriding my scene, right? And I do the same thing for my other ones, like my public update. Also going to return void. That's my scene class, just on my menu class, which is actually a scene. I'm binding them together because they're all scenes now. They're not just containers. So if I can make a change to my scene superclass, my abstract class, and it would roll down to these ones. If I wanted to make some kind of generic static object or something I want to add into my scenes, all the scenes I'm going to make would have it, right? Okay, I don't have that necessity yet, but I will. Then I'm going to go in here and go constructor. Just name these things. Here's my public prop. Same thing as I normally do. I can actually have probably copied my scene class in here. Here's my public methods as an example. Now I can add some specific things. Like for example, in my method, I do scene is equal to new create.js container, right? Well, I don't have to do that anymore because this is a create.js container, right? This is a scene, right? So all I have to do now is I can add stuff like hello label and my my start button. I can add those to the scene, which is it's just me. It's this container. So let's just copy this stuff in here just to show you what I'm talking about. I'm just going to take this whole thing. I'm going to copy this all into my start method for a second. Watch. There's all my stuff in my start method. Now it's not going to make any sense because I don't have a scene and I don't need to do this. So I can just get rid of this, right? My hello label is global, but I don't want to call it my hello label. I want to create a label, a hello label up here. Let's get rid of, to see that's going to happen, in the global scope where I have my game variables, my hello label, and my start button. Let's get rid of them, right? So I don't have them anymore. So it's going to error out now. I want it to error out. So I'm just going to get rid of these. So I want to compartmentalize my objects into kind of their own. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. All right, now I got all these errors, right? Because I've taken the thing away, and I did it on purpose. What I'm talking about. So I need to create in my menu. And we're gonna clean this up for a second, right? Underneath my class menu and above my constructor, I'm gonna create anything that's public that I want to update. Now, do I have to make my hello label? Does it ever need to be kind of like shared on the public, on the global namespace? Do I ever have to have my hello label in the global space if I have my own update method? The answer is no. I don't have to do that. So I can do this. I can make it private. So I'm going to say private, right? These are my private instance variables. That's what they are. And in my private instance variables, I'm going to add in a hello label, right? So I'm going to call this hello label. Check this out, right? Here's my hello label, which is going to be of type, right? I'm going to name this as a type, right? Objects dot label, right? I'm going to kind of, I can still use my objects superclass that or my label superclass that I made, right? My label class. This is called composition, right? So I'm composing my instance variable from another class within this new class that I'm building. Okay, I'm calling this class label within new that I'm making, right? Now it looks like I'm layering, and you're going to be like, Tom, you really need that. Yeah, I do. You'll see, right? Also, from a convention, I want to make this underscore, right? Because any of my private variables are going to have an underscore in front of them, right? So in order for me to do this down here in my start function or my method, I want to do this dot underscore hello label, right? Which is going to be of new objects dot label. This is all good still. And where it says scene dot add child, I'm going to replace scene with this. I'm adding it to, I'm a scene. My menu is a scene. So I'm just going to add my hello label to my scene. So I'm going to say this dot add child, as an example, this dot underscore hello label, right? All right, here's my hello label. Same thing with start button. I don't have a start button. I'm going to add that in as an instance variable, and it's going to be private because it's going to be, I'm going to hide it from everything else. So I'm going to say start button, right? And now I'm going to say, again, it'll be of type objects dot button, right? Because that's the new object I created in my object. So I've got my start button with an underscore. I'm going to go down here and just add another reference to it. I'm going to say this underscore start button then in my start function is a new objects dot button with the same stuff I had before. And I'm also going to create a click event, this dot underscore start button on, right? Here's my click event that I don't have yet. I have to get that for a second, right? I'm going to have to create a click event. And what do I want to do? I want a scene.add child start button. No, I want to do this dot add child this dot underscore start button because I am a container class. Right? So I'm going to get rid of these lines here, and kind of go up like this. And I'm going to make it a little smaller so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So I've got, this is my start method right now. Now, my update's empty, and I also have this other crap down here. Take a look, right? Here's my other crap. And my click start button, method, this click start button here, it's not here. It's actually still lingering in my game, which is right here. I'm going to take this out of here. I don't need a click start button method in my global namespace. That's crazy. Why would I need that? This click start button method, I'd want this inside my menu. So I'm going to take this, cut it out of my game.ts file. I'm going to go back into my menu.ts file, and I'm going to add that in as an additional method that's inside of my class, which is going to be what? A private method. I never have to ever expose that method to the rest of the world, right? It's my public, my private method. I'm gonna create that another space underneath my public update methods. My public update method, right, which I haven't filled in yet. I'm gonna make another method down here, another grouping, which is gonna be called private methods, that I'm gonna call only for my function, right? My private method. And inside here, I'm going to make this, I'm going to kind of copy and paste from the other thing. So this is my function, right? But I'm going to get rid of the function because that's a method, right? Here's my method, private underscore click start button, right? Which is going to take an event of type create.js mouse event and return void. And it's going to take my this dot underscore hello label and change my click my right now that's all it's going to do, and it's going to change my my hello label text to clicked, just like we normally had. This is my callback function, my event handler for my start button click, which is happening right here. Now I call my here's my on. My on is my my event itself. This is the event listener, right? There's my event listener. This is from my start button event, right? But I need this. The reason why it's red here is because this .click start button, it has to be this .click start button, and it's got to be with an underscore because it's a private method. So I'm going to say this ._ click start button, and I'm also passing a context this context itself in there if I need it. Okay, guess what? I don't need any of this crap. This whole method, this whole class is done, right? Now there's going to be some changes because Lucy, because you know what's happening right now. I'm in trouble. Right? Because I've made a bunch of changes here to my method, but this is my class. This is my new class, and look how beautiful it looks now. It makes sense. I've got my start method. This is where everything is going to happen. I've got my update method for now, which is empty, that I've overridden, right, from my original class, my states menu, and I've got my new private method that's only accessible for my class, which is this click event that I'm hiding, so I can't ever get to it outside of my class. I'm actually information hiding, and I'm protecting my other potential menu states from leaking over from one to the other. My global namespace has only the stuff that I need to set up my stage, right, and all that kind of stuff on my canvas. I don't have anything else exposed anymore in this way. Okay, cool. Now has been added already. I don't have to re-add this menu TS file. It's actually added into my game, but now I have a problem with my game. All right, if I go back up to my game, I created a stage, and I created a scene of type create.js container. This scene's got to go. So this is in my game.ts file. So I don't need a scene anymore. I have a scene, like with a capital S, that I made. My state function is cool, but guess what it's going to receive? Scene.update. That's the type it's going to be now, because my state function is or scene.start. That's what it is. So it's a scene.start, right? If I want to change it, let's leave it as any for now, and I'll go back and I'll show you. Okay. Now I've got my stage update and all this kind of stuff that I've got in here. And then when I come to here, where it says states menu, right? So my state function is a states menu. I can't really do this because I haven't instantiated my menu scene yet. So this is where I would create new objects that's in the global space. Let's try this out. Watch. So I need to make some game objects. And this is the first object we're going to make. We're going to say var menu with the lowercase m, right, is of type, right, states dot menu with a capital M, right? That's what it's typed. So I'm creating a reference here. Now, somewhere, I have to instantiate these items. I could do it here in my global namespace because all I'm doing is instantiating the class. I don't have to pass anything to my menu. I just need for them to be created so they're accessible. This lowercase menu would then be accessible anywhere in my game. It is right now anyway, right? So I could instantiate them here in my states. I could instantiate my states in a function, which makes more sense, almost like initialize states, if you will, or whatever, where I declare all of them. But I'd rather do it in here inside my state machine, right? Where not only do I say my state function, but I instantiate what config state, if that's the actual config state it is, I actually create them here. So I would do something like this. Menu then is equal to a new, right, states dot menu, right? Now it's packed with information, this menu, lowercase m, right? And now my state function, which is what I want to do, it's going to kick off. I'm going to call it down here, my state function, right? And I made this on purpose because I don't know what it's going to be that I'm going to instantiate, right? My state function is going to be my menu dot start. So that's what it's going to be. So I'm going to say menu then dot start. Okay, so that's what it's going to be. Okay, this should have the same effect. So my state function gets called. I'm actually calling start, menu dot start, right? I know it's kind of a convoluted way of thinking about things when you look at it the first time. Okay, one more thing. I'm also going to do over here, take a look in my state. Before I update my stage, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say state, so state function, which is my state function, right? But here's something that's bugging me. And I'm calling it state function. But really what I need to call this state function is like current state, right? So what I need to do is this states function here. Let's rename this thing. So I'm going to go refactor rename, because that makes more sense now because I'm redoing all this stuff. And instead of state function, it's not a function anymore. It's a method and it's a class. So I'm just going to call this current state. This is what my current state's going to be now. Now is exactly what I told you before. I can change this from any, right, to what? Well, it's the same as before, right, which is a type of state of scene, right, if you will, and it is exactly what it is. So I'm going to say objects. It's of type objects.scene, and this is where it ties in nicely. See, here's my objects.scene. I know that all of them that I'm going to get are of type objects.scene, right? And down here, when I do this, instead of my current state being a menu.start, I don't have to do that. I can just have to say menu, right? So it's a type menu now. So current state is equal to menu. And when I'm down here, where instead of my current state just calling current state, I'm just going to call current state.start, because all functions that are current states are their state functions, because they're all scenes, right? And I can call this current scene or whatever you want to call it instead of states. For now, we're going to keep it this way. We might rejig this later. I'm going to make my current state.start in here, right? Okay, one more thing. Now in here, in my update, I'm going to say, guess what? Current state.update, because it has an update function too that's exposed. I don't know what current state I'm updating because right now there is no update, right? But what I'm doing is whenever I need to do an update, I'll never do it here in the global space. I'll do it back in my class in the local class space, and it'll be actually coming through here. So this is linked in here. I'll call it. This is part of my event loop. I don't have an update yet. My update's empty, right? See? Here's my update. Here's one. One mistake that I made. Stage.child. I'm adding it onto the stage, my global stage object, right? Here's my global stage object. And if you notice, it says scene. Well, it wouldn't be scene. What would it be? This, right? Because I'm adding this onto my stage. So the entire construct now is adding into the stage. And what does it do? It adds a whole set of geometry. Once I create my scene, the whole scene and all of its components, including its update function and everything else, gets added into the stage, right? All that stuff gets added in. All right. Cool, cool. Okay. Let's see. I made all these freaking changes, right? And I'm assuming, and by the way, I only have changed one scene. I'm not even doing another one yet until we know this can work, right? Here's my current start. I'm not getting any errors. That's not the point. The point is not that I'm getting errors here. Let's just build everything. First of all, I'm going to build. I'm going to go build solution before I even run anything. And it's going to go build everything. It's going to say build starting. I've got a build succeeded if I did everything correctly. Let's run it in Chrome now and see what I get. If this works, we're good to go. If it doesn't work and my convoluted brain is not working, let me just refresh to make sure it works. I'm good, and I still get the same functionality as before. Here's something to check. If I go into right-click, inspect element, right, and I want to see what I get, right, and I go to console, right, I don't have anything right here in my console. But what if I want to show my object to see that I'm getting the right object? How do I do that? I think the great place to do that, to do a test to see that everything's working, is right here in my config menu state. Take a look. So here's my menu, right? My menu is actually an object. Let me actually console.out this one, right? So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to pass out menu, whole object itself. So when I do this, I should get a listing of the object and all of its properties. Okay, let's take a look now when I rerun this thing. So I'm going to refresh right here. And when I go back it's going to bring up another version of my code. And when I go right-click, inspect element, I'm going to have in my console a menu object. Take a look at that. That's how beautiful it is. Guys, at least I want you to take just a quick peek. I know you guys are busy over there playing. Let's or doing your thing. But let's take a look. Watch. See this menu object? Watch. Once I open it up, it gives me everything I need. My menu, my parent, my children, my task, my X and Y coordinates, because it is, in fact, its own container class. And I also have, look, here's my hello label, right, which is right here, which I have, it's its own thing. It's an object within the object. I also have a start button, which is a hard-coded object that I have access to right now, right? I also have all kinds of other things that I would normally be doing here. So everything is here. This is a fully complete game object, right? That's encapsulated. That's what I'm going to call it, is protected in its own namespace so that its objects aren't leaking onto the global space. This is what I want. Now I've got a full scene. Now this is the building block I wanted to get to last week. I just didn't have time, right? So what I want to do now for this little building block, and I'm making my little hands here, right? My little node, I can go to the next one, right? And it wouldn't impact anything else. Let me just close all this down for a second and stop this and upload this to GitHub so everyone has everything on the same page for those people who are just watching. So I'm going to go to Solution Explorer and I'm going to pin this up, right? And I'm going to go into Team Explorer here, right? I've stopped debugging, right? I'm going to go to Home and I'm going to go to Changes, and you're going to see a bunch of changes. So here's my changes. I've changed my game state. I changed my menu state. I've also added a bunch of files, and way at the bottom, these are all the untracked files that I would have lost. So I want to add all. I want to track them all, right? So now they're all going to be added in. There's 17 changes I made to this particular commit, you see? And I'm going to add all these changes to the thing upstairs. So I'm going to say created scene class and updated game.js, game.ts, and menu.ts, right? Because those are the ones I added. Commit. Okay, so those are good. And now I'm going to go home, unsync commits, and sync. And now what it's going to do, it's going to pull the current branch, and if everything goes well, it's going to throw everything back out. So when I go back to here, and when I go look online and refresh, right, now you're going to see that there's a fourth commit with all these changes. And if I go back into my project now, I've got quite a comprehensive project where all my scripts are labeled nicely. Here's my object, and you can see right in there, there is now a new scene object. So this is really awesome. And I'm going to pause here. We're going to take a short break. And when I come back, I'm going to fully build out the other scenes as scene objects. Now I'm cooking with oil, right? I can go like boom, 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 and it's all going to be done. You can modify your start method, just like we do in Unity or some other game object. I'll modify your start method, pop things into your update method, and everything will update in 60 frames per second, and you don't have to worry about anything else. It's all managed for you behind the scenes, right? And that's what I wanted to get to. But there's nothing like that. There's no construct. There's no scene construct, right, that exists in Create.js. We've just had to create it by hand, right? All right, so we're going to pause it there, and we'll come back after the break.